When rain washes away your last hope, Claire Montgomery pressed her back against the cold brick wall, watching rainwater cascade down the Manhattan street like a river of broken dreams. Her cardboard box of belongings sat beside her, getting soggy, despite the flimsy plastic bag she had wrapped around it. 24 hours ago, she had a job, an apartment, and a future. Now she had wet shoes and $17 in her pocket. The day had started with her landlord, Mr. Patterson, banging on her door at 6 in the morning. His weathered face showed no sympathy as he informed her the building was being sold and all tenants needed to vacate within 24 hours. Something about emergency renovations and legal loopholes she did not understand. By noon, she had packed her life into 2 boxes and 1 suitcase. Then came the phone call from her boss at the boutique design firm where she worked as a junior assistant. Budget cuts, they said. Last hired, first fired. Her dream of becoming an interior designer in New York City was crumbling faster than she could process. Claire pulled her thin jacket tighter as the October wind picked up. She had called every friend she knew in the city, but most were roommates themselves, with no extra space. Her college friend Jenny offered a couch for tonight, but she lived 2 hours away in Brooklyn, and Claire had missed the last subway connection. The street was emptying as the storm intensified. Taxis splashed by without stopping, their yellow lights blurred through the sheets of rain. Claire felt tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. Though she tried to convince herself it was just the weather, stranger's question changes everything. That was when the Blacktown car pulled up to the curb directly in front of her. She barely noticed at first, assuming it would drive away like all the others. Instead, the back door opened, and a man's voice cut through the storm. "Are you all right out here?" Claire looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing under a large umbrella. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, dark hair slightly mussed by the wind and striking blue eyes that seemed genuinely concerned. Everything about him screamed wealth and success. From his Italian leather shoes to the Rolex on his wrist. "I'm fine," Claire lied automatically, her Midwest instincts telling her not to trust strangers, especially in New York City. The man glanced at her soaked cardboard box and raised an eyebrow. "You don't look fine. You look like someone who needs help." "I don't need charity," Claire said, lifting her chin despite shivering from cold. Her mother always taught her to stand tall, even when you felt small. "I wasn't offering charity," the man replied calmly. "I was offering common human decency. There's a difference." Something about his tone made Claire pause. There was no condescension in his voice, no pity, just straightforward honesty. "I'm James Ashford," he continued, extending his hand. "I own the building you're standing in front of, and I happen to have several empty guest suites that aren't being used. It seems wasteful to let them sit vacant while someone stands in the rain." Claire stared at his outstretched hand, her mind racing. This was exactly the kind of situation her mother had warned her about. Strange men offering help that came with strings attached. But as thunder rumbled overhead and another wave of cold rain soaked through her last dry layer of clothing, her options felt painfully limited. "Taking a leap of faith, why would you help me?" she asked, needing to understand his motives before making any decision. James lowered his hand and considered the question seriously. 5 years ago, my sister Rachel was in a similar situation. New to Chicago, lost her job and apartment in the same week. She was too proud to call home for help. She spent 3 nights sleeping in her car before she finally broke down and called me. His expression darkened slightly. "I got there as fast as I could, but those 3 nights changed her. She developed pneumonia that turned serious. It taught me that sometimes people need help, and sometimes the rest of us need to offer it, no questions asked." Claire felt something shift inside her. The way he talked about his sister carried real pain, real regret. This was not some calculated manipulation. This was someone who understood. "I'm Claire Montgomery," she said finally, taking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, warm despite the cold rain. "Nice to meet you, Claire. Now, can we please get out of this storm before we both catch pneumonia?" James helped her gather her belongings, not seeming to care that the cardboard box was falling apart or that water was ruining his expensive suit. His driver, an older man named Thomas, quickly stored her things in the trunk while James held the umbrella over Claire. The interior of the car was warm and dry, with leather seats that probably cost more than Claire had spent on furniture in her entire life. She felt acutely aware of how out of place she looked, dripping water onto the pristine floor mats. "I should mention," James said as the car pulled away from the curb, "I'm not some creep with ulterior motives. My penthouse has a completely separate guest wing with its own entrance, kitchen, and bathroom. You'd have total privacy. I'm barely home anyway, since I'm usually at the office or traveling for business." Claire nodded, appreciating his directness. "And what do you expect in return?" "Nothing immediately," James replied. "Though I noticed you have a portfolio bag there. What kind of work do you do?" "Interior design," Claire answered. "Or I was trying to. I just lost my job today along with my apartment." James's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Well, that's fortunate timing. I just acquired 3 new properties that need complete redesigns. If you're interested, you could look at them and give me your professional opinion. Consider it consulting work. I pay well for good advice." The car turned onto Fifth Avenue, and Claire saw the building they were approaching. It was one of those classic New York structures that practically screamed old money and established power. The doorman rushed out with an umbrella as they pulled up. "This is me," James said. "The guest wing is on the 42nd floor. What do you say, Claire? Ready to get out of the rain?" Claire took a deep breath, thinking about her grandmother's favorite saying, "Sometimes God sends help in unexpected packages." This was certainly unexpected, but maybe that was exactly what she needed. "Kay," she said softly. "Thank you, James, really." They rode the elevator up to the penthouse. Claire caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked like a drowned rat, her blonde hair plastered to her head and mascara smudged under her eyes. But for the first time in 24 hours, she felt a flicker of hope. A new world opens. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and Claire stepped into a world she had only seen in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Manhattan skyline, now dramatic with storm clouds and lightning. The main living area was massive, but oddly impersonal, decorated in cold grays and blacks with expensive furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. "The guest wing is through here," James said. Leading her down a hallway lined with modern art, he opened a door to reveal a suite that was bigger than her entire previous apartment. The space had a living area with a comfortable-looking couch and chair, a kitchenette with stainless steel appliances, and through another door, a bedroom with a king-sized bed. Everything was decorated in warm creams and soft blues, much more inviting than the main penthouse. "This is incredible," Claire breathed, setting down her ruined cardboard box on the marble counter. "The bathroom has a rain shower and a soaking tub," James added. "Towels are in the cabinet, and there should be some basic toiletries. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen? I'll have Thomas bring up your other things once they dry out." He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "That's my cell number. Call or text if you need anything." "I mean that, Claire. Anything at all." "I don't know how to thank you," Claire said, feeling overwhelmed by his generosity. James smiled.
"Oh."
And it transformed his serious face into something warmer, more approachable. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we can talk about those properties I mentioned." "Deal." "Deal," Claire agreed after James left. Claire stood alone in the beautiful guest suite, listening to the rain pound against the windows. Just hours ago, she had been standing on a street corner with nowhere to go and no prospects. Now she was in a penthouse on Fifth Avenue, the potential job opportunity. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights twinkling through the storm. Her reflection stared back at her, still bedraggled, but no longer quite so defeated. "Okay, universe," she whispered to her reflection. "I'm listening. Let's see where this goes," as she turned to explore her temporary new home. Claire had no idea that this one rainy night would change the entire trajectory of her life. That the successful, guarded man who had offered her shelter was about to become so much more than just a generous stranger, and that together they would build something neither of them had known they were missing. But first, she needed a hot shower and a good night's sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and surprises. For tonight, she was warm, dry, and safe, and sometimes that was enough. Morning light and new perspectives. Claire woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar luxury surrounding her, the events of the previous night came flooding back as she sat up in the impossibly comfortable bed. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream, but the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets and the stunning view of Central Park confirmed her new reality. She checked her phone. 8:30 in the morning. A text from an unknown number glowed on her screen. "Good morning, Claire. Hope you slept well. Fresh coffee and breakfast pastries in your kitchen. Take your time settling in. We can meet around 11 if that works for you, James." Claire smiled at his thoughtfulness. She showered in the luxurious bathroom, marveling at the rainfall showerhead and heated floors. Her limited wardrobe looked shabby hanging in the massive closet, but she chose her best outfit, a simple navy dress. She had bought 4 job interviews and a cardigan that had seen better days. When she emerged into the living area, she found not just coffee and pastries, but a full breakfast spread. Fresh fruit, yogurt, granola, orange juice, and still warm croissants that smelled like heaven. A small note card sat beside the coffee maker. "Wasn't sure what you liked, so I had Thomas pick up options. Help yourself to anything. The main kitchen is also available if you prefer to cook, James." Claire poured coffee into a delicate porcelain cup and stood by the windows, watching the city come alive below. People hurried along the sidewalks like tiny ants, each one carrying their own stories, their own struggles. Yesterday she had been one of them. Today, she was 42 floors above it all, literally and figuratively. A professional proposition at exactly 11 o'clock, Claire's doorbell chimed. She opened it to find James looking considerably different from the rain-soaked Good Samaritan of last night. He wore dark jeans and a crisp white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Looking more approachable and somehow younger. "Good morning," he said with a genuine smile. "Did you find everything okay?" "More than okay. Thank you for breakfast. You really didn't have to do all that." "I wanted to," James replied simply. "Listen, I have a proposition for you. Want to take a walk while we talk?" They rode the elevator down together, and James led her out onto Fifth Avenue. The city had been washed clean by last night's storm, and the October air was crisp and refreshing. They walked toward Central Park, weaving through the morning crowds. "I meant what I said about consulting work," James began. "I recently acquired 3 properties. One is a historic brownstone in Brooklyn Heights that needs complete renovation. Another is a modern loft in Tribeca that feels cold and impersonal. The third is a boutique hotel in the West Village that has good bones but terrible execution. Lesson, 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 lesson. Her designer brain already spinning with possibilities. "I've worked with several high-end design firms," James continued, "but they all give me the same cookie-cutter luxury looks. Everything ends up feeling like a museum, not a place where people actually live or want to stay. Last night, when I saw your portfolio bag, I looked through some of your work while you were sleeping." Claire stopped walking. "You went through my things?" "I knocked first and you didn't answer. The bag was wet, and I was worried your work might be damaged," James explained quickly. "I'm sorry if that was overstepping, but Claire, your designs are remarkable. They have warmth and personality. They look like places where real people would actually want to be." Claire felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. "Those are just student projects and a few small jobs I did on the side. They're brilliant," James insisted. "And I want to hire you to redesign all 3 properties. Full creative control, generous budget, and a salary of $10,000 per property plus bonuses when they're complete." Claire nearly tripped over her own feet. $30,000 total? Plus bonuses, James repeated. "And you can work from here while you find a permanent place. No rent, no strings. Just good work in exchange for fair pay." Breaking down barriers, they entered Central Park, following the path around the pond. Claire's mind was racing. This was the kind of opportunity designers dreamed about, the kind that could launch a real career. But something held her back. Why me? She asked. You don't know anything about me? I could be terrible at this. I could take your money and disappear. James sat down on a bench, overlooking the water, and Claire joined him. You want the honest truth? When I looked through your portfolio, I saw something that reminded me of my sister Rachel. She had this gift for making spaces feel like home. After she passed away 2 years ago, I realized I had been surrounding myself with expensive things, but no actual warmth. My penthouse looks like a showroom because I let some fancy designer make all the decisions. His voice carried real pain. And Claire understood this was about more than just business. I'm sorry about your sister, she said softly. She would have liked you, James said with a sad smile. She always said, I needed to stop hiding behind my success and actually connect with people. Last night, when I saw you in the rain, I heard her voice in my head telling me to stop and help. So I did. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching ducks glide across the pond. I'll do it, Claire said finally. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I need to pay rent. Even if it's small, I need to contribute something. Second, this stays professional. I appreciate everything you've done, but I don't want there to be any confusion about what this arrangement is. And third, if my work isn't good enough, you tell me honestly. No pity projects. James extended his hand. Deal. Though I disagree about the rent. How about instead, you redesign my main living space as a fourth project? That way you're contributing something of value. Claire shook his hand, feeling the now familiar warmth of his grip. Deal. Worlds colliding, the next 3 weeks passed in a blur of productive creativity. Claire threw herself into the projects with an intensity she had never experienced before. The Brooklyn brownstone became her first focus. And she spent days measuring rooms, sketching designs, and meeting with contractors that James connected her with. Her vision was to honor the building's historic character, while making it functional for modern life. She chose warm paint colors, restored the original hardwood floors, designed custom built-ins that maximized space without sacrificing charm. James visited the site weekly, and each time his enthusiasm for her work grew. This is exactly what I wanted but couldn't articulate, he said during one visit, running his hand along a restored banister. It feels both classic and contemporary. That's the goal, Claire replied, checking measurements for a window seat she was designing. Buildings like this have stories. My job is to honor those stories while writing new chapters. Their working relationship was comfortable and collaborative. James trusted her vision, but offered practical business insights about budgets and timelines. Claire found herself looking forward to their meetings, appreciating his quick mind and dry sense of humor, but their different worlds became starkly apparent one evening when James invited her to a fundraising gala for a children's hospital. I need to make an appearance, and it would help to have someone there who isn't trying to pitch me business deals all night, he explained. Plus, it's for a good cause. Rachel volunteered there before she died. Claire hesitated. James, I don't have anything appropriate to wear to something like that. That's easily solved. Consider it a work expense. You're representing my company now. The next day, a personal stylist arrived at the penthouse with racks of designer gowns. Claire felt overwhelmed by the options, each one costing more than she used to make in a month. She finally chose a midnight blue gown that was elegant without being too flashy. An evening of revelations, the gala was held at the Plaza Hotel. Claire felt like she had stepped into a different universe. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, champagne flowed freely, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. The women wore jewels that could have paid off student loans, and the men discussed business deals worth millions as casually as others might discuss the weather. James stayed close to her side, introducing her as his interior design consultant. Most people were polite, but clearly curious about who she was and where she had come from. Claire felt their assessing gazes, measuring her worth by standards she didn't fully understand. James, darling. A woman's voice cut through the crowd. Claire turned to see an elegant older woman in diamonds approaching, accompanied by a younger woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. Aunt Margaret, James said with noticeably less warmth than he had shown anyone else that evening. Vanessa. We heard you had finally hired a new designer, Margaret said, her eyes sweeping over Claire with barely concealed judgment. How refreshing to see you branching out from the usual firms. There was something sharp beneath her polite tone. Something that made Claire's defenses rise. Claire Montgomery is exceptionally talented, James said firmly, his hand moving to the small of Claire's back in a protective gesture. She's transforming 3 of my properties. How wonderful, Vanessa purred, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. And where did you study, Claire? Parsons Pratt. University of Ohio, Claire replied, lifting her chin. I focused on sustainable design and adaptive reuse of historic buildings. Ohio, Margaret repeated, as if it were a foreign country. How interesting. James, we should discuss the foundation board meeting. Would you excuse us for a moment? James looked like he wanted to refuse, but duty won out. I'll be right back, he promised Claire quietly. Left alone, Claire grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and tried to blend into the background. She watched James across the room, deep in conversation with his aunt and several other older men in tuxedos. He looked different here, more guarded, wearing his success like armor. You must be James's latest charity project. Claire turned to find Vanessa beside her, her smile sharp as a knife. Excuse me? Oh, don't take it personally, Vanessa continued, her tone dripping with false sweetness. James has always had a savior complex. He finds people who need rescuing, helps them for a while, then moves on to the next project. I should know. We were engaged once. Claire felt her stomach drop. James had never mentioned an ex-fiancé. He told me about his sister, Claire said carefully. About wanting to help people. Rachel's death devastated him, Vanessa acknowledged, and for a moment her mask slipped to show genuine sadness. But it also changed him. He pushes everyone away now, hides behind his work and his money. You seem sweet, so I'll give you some advice. Don't mistake his generosity for something deeper. James Ashford doesn't let anyone truly in anymore. Once you're no longer a project to fix, he'll lose interest. Before Claire could respond, James reappeared at her side. Everything okay? Fine, Claire lied, her mind reeling from Vanessa's words. Actually, I'm not feeling well. Would it be okay if we left? Confronting the truth, the ride back to the penthouse was silent. James kept glancing at her with concern, but Claire stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. Once they were alone in the elevator, James finally spoke. What did Vanessa say to you? The truth, apparently, Claire replied, her voice sharper than intended. That I'm just another project. Another person you're trying to save to make yourself feel better about your sister. That's not fair, James protested, as the elevator doors opened. Isn't it? Claire turned to face him, all the emotions of the past few weeks finally bubbling over. You never mentioned an ex-fiancé. You've never talked about why you really live alone in this massive penthouse. I thought we were becoming friends, but maybe Vanessa's right. Maybe once I'm not broken anymore, I'll stop being interesting to you. Is that really what you think of me? James asked, and Claire saw a hurt flash across his face. I don't know what to think, Claire admitted. Our worlds are so different, James. Tonight made that crystal clear. I don't belong in ballrooms at the plaza. I don't speak the language your aunt and her friends speak. And maybe that's okay for a working relationship. But I need to know what this is, because it's starting to feel like more than just business to me, and I can't afford to be wrong about that. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken feelings. James stepped closer, his blue eyes intense in the soft lighting of the penthouse. You're right. I never told you about Vanessa. We were engaged 4 years ago, before Rachel died. She came from the right family, had the right connections, fit perfectly into my world. But after Rachel's death, when I needed someone to just be there with me in my grief, Vanessa couldn't handle it. She wanted the successful businessman, not the broken man mourning his sister. So she left. He took a breath, vulnerability clear in his expression. I built walls after that. Threw myself into work, surrounded myself with expensive things, but no real connections. And yes, when I saw you in that rainstorm, part of me was thinking about Rachel, about second chances and not walking away when someone needs help. But Claire, Every day since then, you've become less about my past and more about my present. Maybe even my future. Claire felt her heart racing. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between arguing about paint colors and watching you bring dead spaces back to life, I started falling for you. Not because you're a project to fix, but because you're brave and talented and you challenge me to be better. You make me want to knock down those walls I built. A moment of truth. Claire stood frozen, torn between hope and fear. Everything Vanessa had said echoed in her mind. But when she looked into James's eyes, she saw something real, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared that I'm not enough for your world. That eventually you'll realize I don't fit and I'll lose everything I've built here. James closed the distance between them, his hands gently cupping her face. You don't need to fit my world, Claire. You've already started changing it. That penthouse feels like a home now when you're in it. My properties are becoming places with soul because of your vision. And I'm remembering how to be human instead of just successful. What about your aunt? Your ex? All those people who think I'm just some small-town girl playing in the big city. Let them think what they want, James said firmly. I learned a long time ago that you can't live your life by other people's expectations. Rachel taught me that before she died. She always said the only opinion that matters is your own and the people you love. Claire felt tears welling up. This is crazy. We barely know each other. Then let's change that, James replied, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. No more walls, no more pretending this is just business. Let's see where this goes, together. What do you say? Claire thought about the girl who had stood in the rain 4 weeks ago, homeless and hopeless. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming. The designer bringing her visions to life, the person brave enough to take chances. Maybe love was just another kind of leap of faith. Okay, she breathed. Let's see where this goes. When James kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. And as Claire kissed him back, she realized that sometimes the storm that tears your life apart is the same storm that brings you exactly where you need to be. When doubt creeps in the weeks following their confession, should have been perfect. Claire continued working on the properties, now with James's full emotional support as well as financial backing. The Brooklyn brownstone was nearing completion, already attracting interest from potential buyers. The Tribeca loft had been transformed from cold minimalism to warm sophistication, and the boutique hotel project was generating buzz and design, circles before it even opened. But success brought unexpected challenges. As Claire's reputation grew, so did the scrutiny. Design blogs started featuring her work, praising her innovative approach to blending historic preservation with modern functionality. With that attention came questions about her background, her relationship with James, and how a relatively unknown designer from Ohio had landed such prestigious projects. Have you seen this? Claire's friend Jenny asked during a coffee date, showing her phone across the table. It was a gossip blog post titled Rags to Riches Romance or Calculated Career Move. Claire's stomach churned as she read the article, which suggested she had manipulated James, using his grief over his sister to gain access to his wealth and connections. Anonymous sources claimed she was a gold digger, and the comments section was even worse. It's garbage, Jenny said firmly. Everyone who knows you understands that. You're the hardest working person I know. But the words stung, especially because they echoed Claire's own deepest insecurities. Was she good enough on her own merit? Or would people always see her as the woman who got lucky because a billionaire took pity on her? Family Matters that evening, James found Claire sitting in the dark in her suite, staring out at the city lights. He had been away in Boston for business meetings, and seeing her distress immediately concerned him. Claire, what's wrong? She handed him her phone with the article still open. His jaw tightened as he read, his expression growing darker with each paragraph. This is slander. We can sue them for defamation. That would only make it worse, Claire said tiredly. It would confirm we're together and make me look even more like I'm using you. Maybe they're right, James. Maybe I did use you, even if I didn't mean to. James sat beside her, taking her hands in his. Look at me. You earned every success you've had. Your talent, your work ethic, your vision, That's all you. I just opened doors. You walked through them on your own merit. But what if I can't tell the difference anymore? Claire's voice cracked. What if I've gotten so comfortable in your world that I've forgotten who I was before? The girl from Ohio who worked 3 jobs to put herself through design school, who knew the value of every dollar, who understood struggle. Before James could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. It's my Aunt Margaret. I should take this. Claire listened to his side of the conversation, hearing the tension in his voice. No, I won't be attending, because it's none of the board's business who I date. Margaret, this isn't up for debate. Claire is important to me, and if people can't accept that, they can find another donor. He hung up and rubbed his temples. The Hospital Foundation Board is concerned about negative publicity affecting donations. Margaret suggested it might be better if we kept our relationship private until things died down. Maybe she's right, Claire said quietly. Maybe we're causing problems for things that actually matter, like the children's hospital. No. James's voice was firm. I'm not hiding you like you're something to be ashamed of. I did that before, lived my life according to what other people expected, and it made me miserable. A crisis forces clarity the next morning brought a different kind of problem. Claire arrived at the Brooklyn brownstone to find contractors standing around looking worried. The project foreman, a gruff man named Robert, approached her immediately. We've got a situation. The city inspector found some structural issues we missed in the initial assessment. The back wall needs significant reinforcement. We're looking at a 3-week delay and about $70,000 in additional costs. Claire's heart sank. This was her first major project, and a delay like this could destroy her credibility. She pulled out her phone to call James, but hesitated. This was her project to manage. She needed to handle it herself. Show me everything, she told Robert. For the next 3 hours, Claire crawled through the basement with the inspector, examined foundation reports, and consulted with structural engineers. By the time she emerged, dirty and exhausted, she had a plan. It would require redesigning the back wall system, negotiating with suppliers for faster delivery, and personally overseeing weekend work crews. But it could be done without destroying the timeline or budget too badly. She called James not to ask for help, but to inform him of her solution. I'm impressed, he said, when she finished explaining. That's creative problem solving. But Claire, you don't have to do this alone. I can have my senior project manager help coordinate. No, I don't have to, Claire replied. But I want to. This is my project, my reputation. If I'm going to be taken seriously as a designer, I need to prove I can handle the tough stuff, not just the pretty finishes. That weekend, Claire was on site both days, working alongside contractors. She wore steel-toed boots and a hard hat, getting her hands dirty, earning respect from the construction crew who had initially been skeptical of the young designer. James showed up Saturday afternoon with coffee and sandwiches for everyone. Thought you might need fuel, he said. Watching her direct the placement of support beams with confident authority, Robert approached them, wiping sweat from his forehead. Your designer knows her stuff, Mr. Ashford. Most of the fancy people we work with have never even held a hammer. She just spent 20 minutes helping us problem solve a load-bearing issue. Pride shone in James's eyes. She's pretty remarkable. A grand reveal 3 weeks later, Claire stood outside the completed Brooklyn brownstone, watching as potential buyers arrived for the open house. The delay had been overcome, the structural issues resolved, and the final result exceeded even her expectations. The historic facade had been lovingly restored, while inside, modern conveniences blended seamlessly with period details. The kitchen featured custom cabinetry that honored the home's arts and crafts, heritage while incorporating contemporary appliances. Original pocket doors had been refinished, hardwood floors gleamed, and built-in window seats created cozy reading nooks. But Claire's favorite touch was the back wall, the one that had caused so much trouble. She had designed an innovative support system that incorporated exposed beams as a design feature, creating an industrial mid-historic aesthetic that was completely unique. This is extraordinary. A woman in expensive jewelry breathed as she toured the space. It feels both grand and livable. Who did the design? Claire Montgomery, James said, appearing beside Claire with a proprietary smile. She's the most talented designer I've worked with, and I've worked with the best firms in the city. Throughout the afternoon, Claire fielded questions from interested buyers, real estate agents, and even other designers who wanted to know about her process. She answered confidently. No longer the uncertain girl who had stood in the rain months ago as the open house wound down, Margaret Ashford made an unexpected appearance. She walked through the brownstones slowly, examining every detail with a critical eye. Claire held her breath, waiting for judgment. "It's beautiful," Margaret finally said, approaching Claire with an expression that might have been grudging respect. "You've taken a building that was dead and given it new life while honoring its past. That's rare talent." "Thank you," Claire replied cautiously. Margaret glanced at James, who stood protectively nearby. "I owe you both an apology. I judged you unfairly, Claire. I assumed you were another person trying to take advantage of my nephew's generosity. But watching you work these past weeks, seeing how you've handled both success and setbacks with grace, I was wrong. Your sister Rachel would have liked her. She had the same fire, the same refusal to be defined by other people's limitations." James reached for Claire's hand, intertwining their fingers. Rachel would have loved her. Building their future 6 months after that rainy night when everything changed. Claire stood in James's main living space, which had been completely transformed. Gone were the cold grays and impersonal furniture. In their place, warm neutrals created a cozy atmosphere. Custom built-ins displayed photos of Rachel and James's parents alongside. Modern art, comfortable seating invited actual conversation. Plants brought life to every room. But the biggest change was in James himself. He laughed more easily, worked from home more often, and had started a foundation in Rachel's name to help young designers from underprivileged backgrounds. "You know what's funny?" James said, coming up behind Claire and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I bought this penthouse thinking bigger was better, that more space meant more success. But it took you to teach me that space is worthless if it doesn't feel like home." Claire leaned back against him, feeling completely secure in his embrace. "And you taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, and that sometimes the biggest leaps of faith lead to the softest landings." Her phone buzzed with an email notification. She opened it and gasped. "What is it?" James asked. "The American Institute of Architects wants to feature my brownstone project in their quarterly magazine. They're calling it Innovative Adaptive Reuse, that bridges historic preservation with contemporary living." James spun her around and kissed her soundly. "That's incredible. But I'm not surprised. You're brilliant." "We're brilliant," Claire corrected. "You helped me see that I didn't have to choose between staying true to my roots and growing into something bigger, that both could exist together." They stood together at the windows, watching the sun set over Central Park, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I've been thinking," James said carefully. "What if we made this permanent?" Claire's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you stopped paying rent on the guest wing and moved into the main penthouse with me? Not as my consultant or my project, but as my partner in everything." Claire turned to look at him, seeing vulnerability and hope in his eyes. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" "I'm asking you to build a life with me, to keep challenging me, inspiring me, and teaching me what really matters. To turn this house into a home, and to let me be part of your dreams while you're part of mine." Tears filled Claire's eyes, but they were happy tears. She thought about how far she had come from that desperate night in the rain. How she had found not just shelter, but purpose. Not just a job, but a calling. Not just a benefactor, but a true partner. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." As they kissed, with the city lights beginning to twinkle below and the sky fading from gold to purple, Claire realized that sometimes losing everything is exactly what you need to find what you were meant to have all along. Epilogue. Boutique Hotel in the West Village was hosting its grand opening party. Claire stood in the lobby, watching guests admire the space she had created. She had transformed the dated hotel into a modern sanctuary that still honored the building's 1920s heritage. Art Deco details mixed with contemporary comfort, creating an atmosphere that felt both timeless and fresh. But tonight's celebration had an additional significance. James stood beside her, his hand in hers, as they prepared to announce the launch of their new venture together, the Rachel Ashford Foundation for Emerging Designers. The foundation would provide mentorship, funding, and opportunities for talented designers from non-traditional backgrounds, ensuring that talent, not privilege, determines success. "Ready?" James asked, squeezing her hand. Claire looked around at the crowd. A mixture of high society, contractors she had worked with, students from design programs, and her family who had traveled from Ohio. Her mother stood nearby, tears of pride in her eyes. "Ready," Claire confirmed as James stepped up to the microphone to address the crowd. Claire reflected on the journey that had brought her here. A rainstorm, a chance encounter, a leap of faith. It could have gone so differently. But because two people chose courage over fear, vulnerability over walls, partnership over isolation, something beautiful had been built. Not just buildings, though. Those were beautiful too. But a life. A love. A legacy that would help others the way they had helped each other.